Hey, readers, it's Mr. Marshall at Stony Lane. I'm coming to you today because I want to read you a story. And there's sometimes in your life there's a couple of books that you read and you can use them to learn so many different things. And so today I want to introduce you to one of those books that are, that book in my life. And so I think you're gonna really like it. And maybe you've heard this story before, and maybe you haven't. Whatever, you're still gonna love it. Okay, and then we'll have more videos later where we'll be doing some other work with this book. Okay, but for today, let's just enjoy it. This is called The Old Woman Who Named Things, and it's written by Cynthia Rylant, who's a really famous author. She's probably written lots of books that you've read. Um, let's read this book and enjoy it. The Old Woman Who Named Things. Once there was an old woman who loved to name things. She named the old car she drove Betsy. She named the old chair she sat in Fred. She named the old bed she slept on Roxanne. And she named her old house Franklin. Naming things. Every morning she would get out of Roxanne, have a cup of cocoa in Fred, lock up Franklin, and drive to the post office in Betsy. She always hoped for a letter from someone, but all she ever got was bills. The reason the old woman never got any letters was because she had outlived every single one of her friends. So, wait a minute. Did you hear that word? She had outlived every single one of her friends. That's what it means. Yeah, it means that they all kind of died and she was the last one left. Man, I feel so sorry for her every time I read this, don't you? Don't you feel sorry for her? All her friends have died. This worried her. She didn't like the idea of being a lonely old woman without any friends, without anyone who she could call by name. I love the illustrations in this book, don't you? Do you see how this car? What's the car's name? Um, Ra- um, Betsy, right? Doesn't it look like Betsy has a face? Hmm. Let's keep going. So she began to name things, but she named only those things that she knew she could never outlive. Her car Betsy had more get up and go than anything around. Her chair Fred had never sagged a day in his life. Not one creak or moan had she ever heard out of her old bed, Roxanne, and her house Franklin had been standing straight for over 100 years and still didn't look a day past 20. So the old woman never worried about outliving any of them, and so her days were happy. Let's keep going. One day, oh no, you know what happens, right? In books, when it says one day, you know something important is about to happen. So let's pay close attention to what happens next. One day, when the old woman was out soaping some mud off of Betsy, telling her that Franklin wouldn't want to be seen with a car that didn't keep its bumpers a little cleaner, a shy brown puppy came to the old woman's gate. The shy brown puppy wagged its tail. It looked a little hungry. The old woman stood beside Betsy and watched the puppy for a while. She said. So now here we go. This puppy, new character, right? So we're going to try to think about how this woman and this puppy like kind of interact, right? Let's see. Then she walked into Franklin and got a chunk of ham from her refrigerator and came back outside. The old woman gave the ham to the hungry puppy and told it to go home. She told it that Betsy always made puppies sick, and Fred never allowed puppies to sit on him, and Roxanne wasn't wide enough for a puppy and an old woman to fit on. And besides all this, Franklin couldn't tolerate dog hair, so the puppy went away. Hmm. But the next day the puppy was back. The old woman was sitting in Fred, reading a book on everlasting flowers when she saw the puppy through her window. Go home, she called to the puppy. The puppy wagged its tail when it saw her. Go home, she called again. But the puppy just kept wagging. The old woman noticed that it still looked a little hungry, so she went to her refrigerator. She gave the puppy a hunk of cheese and 2 biscuits, and she told it to go home. And the puppy went away. So I bet you're thinking lots of stuff right now, right? This puppy keeps coming back, right? This puppy keeps coming back, and this old woman wants it to go home, right? Who wants a puppy to go home? Why would an old woman want a puppy to go home, especially if she has no friends, right? But she is, right? Let's keep going. That night, as the old woman plumped up the pillows on Roxanne, she thought about the puppy. It was a very nice puppy, she thought. It was a very pretty puppy, she thought. But it couldn't stay. If it stayed, she would have to give it a name. And it could never last as long as Franklin or Fred or Betsy or Roxanne, and she might outlive it. She didn't want to risk that. She didn't want to outlive any more friends. So she would just keep telling it to go home. What a sad thing, right? This poor puppy wants to be this old woman's friend, and she keeps telling it to go away. That's pretty sad. Let's keep going. Every day, the shy brown puppy came to the old woman's gate. Every day she fed it and told it to go home. Always it went away, and always it came back the next day. That went on for many months. The puppy got bigger and bigger until soon it wasn't a puppy anymore. It was a dog, and it was still a dog without a name. And all this time, the old woman had gotten a new wheelbarrow. Had gotten a new dresser that she named Bill, a new wheelbarrow that she named Francine, and a new concrete pig for her garden that she named Bud. But the dog that she faithfully fed at her gate still had no name. And since it had no name, the old woman didn't have to worry about outliving it. She thought herself pretty clever in this. She thought herself pretty clever, but I'm not sure that was the right thing to do, right? That wasn't very smart of her. Don't you think? Because I'm thinking this woman, she really wants to love this puppy, right? Because she's got no friends. And she's just not letting herself, right? Then one day, there's those words again. One day. Important thing is about to happen. Let's pay attention. Then one day, the shy brown dog did not come to the old woman's gate. She sat and fret and watched the gate all day long, but the dog never came. The old woman felt sad. The next day, again the next day, the dog did not come. The old woman drove Betsy around town looking for the dog, but she did not find it. The old woman felt even sadder. Look at that. Look at the poor old woman looking for this dog. She must feel terrible, right? The following day, when still the dog did not come, the old woman knew she had to do something. She picked up her telephone and called the dog catcher. "Have you caught any shy brown dogs?" the old woman asked the dog catcher. "We've got a whole kennel full of shy brown dogs, ma'am," said the dog catcher. "Was yours wearing a collar with its name on it?" "No," said the old woman, and she hung up the telephone. It had no name, and now the dog is gone. How will she ever find it? The old woman sat and thought about the shy brown dog who had no name, who had no collar with a name. Wherever it was, no one would know that it was supposed to come to the old woman's gate every day, that she was supposed to feed it and tell it to go home every day, that things were always supposed to be this way. The shy brown dog had no collar and no name, and no one would ever be able to know these things about it. So the old woman made a decision. She locked up Franklin and drove Betsy to the dog catcher's kennel. And there she said to the dog catcher, "I've come to find my dog." He asked her what color it was. "It's brown," she said. He asked her how old it was. "About a year old," she said. And then he asked her what its name was. Readers, I think something pretty important is about to happen here, don't you? The old woman thought for a moment. She thought of all the old friends she had had, those dear friends with names whom she had outlived. She saw their smiling faces and remembered their lovely names, and she thought how lucky she had been to have known these friends. She thought what a lucky old woman she was. My dog's name is Lucky, she told the dog catcher. He led her to a big yard full of white dogs and black dogs and brown dogs. The old woman looked and looked and looked, and finally she saw her own shy brown dog sitting beside the gate. There he was, look. The dog was looking at Betsy parked in the driveway, and the old woman called out, "Here, Lucky!" And at the sound of her voice, the shy brown dog came running. And from that day on, Lucky lived with the old woman, and he always came when his name was called. It turned out that Betsy didn't make all dogs sick, and Fred was happy to allow a dog to sit on him. And Franklin really didn't mind a little dog hair. And every night, Roxanne was sure to make herself plenty wide enough for a shy, brown, lucky dog and the old woman who named him. And that's the end. It sounds like she really changed, didn't she? She really changed because now she was giving him a name and they got to be friends. And I think they were probably really happy together, don't you? All right, so try to remember that story and we'll do some more work with it later on. See you next time.